The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So we have another sentence in the case of the college admissions bribery scandal. This is a Los Angeles business executive who's been sentenced to 4 months imprisonment for paying $250,000 to get his son admitted to USC as a fake water polo recruit. And we heard about some of these involving, I'm trying to think, Pat, there were like lacrosse ones, was field hockey one of the fake, or not, it's a real sport, but I mean, the people were admitted under the pretense of being athletes when they were not.
I think rowing was one. They always seem to go for the obscure sports. Like no one ever makes their child out to be like some big football or basketball star. They go for like water polo and rowing. Kind of interesting how they do that.
Yeah, I think it would just be much more noticeable if there's like a big recruit for football and then like no one ever sees them playing football or something like that. We're talking about 53-year-old Devin Sloan. Pleads guilty to a single count of fraud and conspiracy in a deal with prosecutors. He's the second parent to be sentenced in this college admissions scandal that has pulled in a lot of wealthy people, including many Hollywood folks, or some Hollywood folks. The district judge in question, Indira Talwani, ordered Sloan to 500 hours of community service over 2 years after being released from the 4-month sentence, as well as a fine of $95,000. The authorities say that Sloan was not, listen, even if all he did was pay money, that would not make him a bystander, but he was involved in helping to fabricate the documents that depicted his son as an international water polo star, even though he had never played the sport. So I think that the main concern here that a lot of people are expressing, Pat, is whether the punishments here are in line with the punishments for other wrongdoing. Like, for example, there's a story, I'm going from memory, of a mom who lied about what her address was so that her kid could go to a slightly better school. And I feel like she got 5 years or something like that. Like, I think a lot of the problem people are having is that the punishments seem out of line, low compared to other infractions.
Well, especially because these parents are trying to do what's best for their children, but it's not as if these are like poor children and poor families who are just trying to get by, just trying to get food on the plate, just trying to find a place to live, or even trying to get their child like admitted into some school. This is like a selective school that they're trying to go after here. So that's why I think it's a little bit different in this case. They're not trying to get their children into the community college so they can better themselves and have some sort of future. They're trying to get them into like these top ranked schools. And I guess the other bad thing that you're doing is you're taking away a spot from someone who would deserve it, right? There's another water polo star out there in the country who doesn't get a spot at USC because of this guy.
So the other thing here at issue is this idea of, it's been mentioned. So last week, the Desperate Housewives star Felicity Huffman was the first person sentenced. And she got 14 days in prison, 250 hours of community service, and a $30,000 fine. And it came up in her trial and in this one with this Sloan guy that they're doing it to help their children. And the judge said, this is not basic caretaking for your kid. You're not stealing a loaf of bread to feed a kid that would otherwise go hungry. It's not getting your kid clothing. It's not even just getting your kid a college education. It's specifically committing a crime to get your child what is considered a more exclusive educational opportunity, and basically doing away completely, Pat, with the notion that it should be seen in the context of, I was just doing what was good for my kid.
Yeah, and what Sloan did in particular, I think, was bad because he got his kid directly involved. Like, he actually had his child go into the family swimming pool so he could take action shots of him playing water polo. And I think that crosses an extra line there because some of these other stars and rich people who are caught up in this scandal, they didn't even let the kid know what they were doing. Like, they would fabricate SAT scores, but not necessarily tell the child what they did. To, like, implicate your own child in the crime, I think that's an extra step there. And I think that's why the sentence has to be a little bit harsher because of that.
And we will see who else is brought down. Certainly, these are not going to be the only two sentences, and we'll continue to follow and track how the sentences here compare to other crimes, sometimes committed by poor people, in terms of the strictness and severity of the punishments. Google and other search engines must agree to the European citizens' requests for some information about them to be forgotten online. This is the right to be forgotten that exists in Europe with regard to internet law. but it is not a global process according to the European Court of Justice. It applies only to search sites within the European Union. And this is a massive win for Google because it puts pretty significant restrictions on the decision from 5 years ago, which affirmed that individuals have the right to ask tech companies to remove URLs from search results that are related to their name. And since the 2014 ruling, Google has used location information to geo-block users from seeing links that were requested to be removed. But France's privacy agency hit Google with a big fine a few years ago, hoping to compel them to dereference the disputed URLs. Because here's the basically the difference. I'm a European person. I petition Google to remove certain links about me under the guise of the right to be forgotten law. What Google was doing was saying, okay, if someone in France has requested that, we will make it so that no one in France can access those pages, as opposed to removing references to those pages altogether from Google's search engine. And that is not okay. And Google has been fined for that. This new decision actually is beneficial to Google in that it only needs to do this for websites that operate inside an EU member state, like google.fr. So yes, Google will have to remove the reference from google.fr altogether, not just geo-blocking it, but not, for example, from google.com. So this is like just a massive win, Pat, for the search engines.
Yeah, but because we know that the internet operates on a global scale, there are going to be ways around this. Even if you use like a VPN or something like that, would that help?
Absolutely, yeah. If you are in France and you VPN into google.com from a US-based IP address, all of a sudden all that information is now again in Google search results. And ultimately, I mean, listen, the other thing is, what about the websites themselves? Because we're not talking at all about websites being removed. And of course, that would be a completely different legal infrastructure to force the deletion of websites that don't contain any illegal information. And to be clear, we're not talking about that. It's merely search result references. And I don't know what the future is of this. I mean, I think sometimes, Pat, in a very long time, am I going to want those references to my old business website from when I was 19 and it's like a lame headshot of me? Like, am I going to want that indefinitely referenced? I don't know. It doesn't really sound great to me.
Yeah, I mean, today I was reminded that David has an account on wikifeet.com.
Right.
There are about 7 or 8 different pictures of his feet on there.
Sure.
Is he going to want that in the future? Probably not. I think he's okay with it now, but down the road, I don't think he's going to be okay with it. And yeah, it makes me wonder, like, should we have this like right to be forgotten law here in the United States? Should it be something that's just kind of worldwide and that all websites have to abide by it? I mean, it's kind of tough to operate a website when anyone can just like make a request and you have to like kind of go through the request and then, you know, that takes a lot of resources. And I guess the standard now is that the URL must be deemed inadequate, irrelevant, no longer relevant, or excessive. And that, you know, I think that's a pretty easy standard to meet.
Yeah. And Wikifeet, by the way, I'm unable to comment about that because I do have pending litigation involving Wikifeet, so it would be inappropriate for me to comment before that is resolved. Turkish President Erdogan said yesterday that nuclear power should be either free for all states or completely banned, and warned that inequality between states who have nuclear power and those who do not undermines global balances. Now, Turkey signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1980. They signed the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which bans all nuclear detonations for any purpose. But Erdogan has been hinting that he wants the same protections for Turkey as Israel, which foreign analysts say already has a sizable nuclear arsenal. Although I don't know, Israel has been pretty deliberately ambiguous around the nuclear issue, and that is also maybe part of what's going on here. I think this is an interesting approach, Pat, because when you talk only of nuclear power, you are taking the conversation away from nuclear weapons. And of course, there are a number of countries that benefit from talking about nuclear only in terms of power rather than nuclear in terms of specifically weapons capabilities. And when you make it a more abstract conversation in this way and say, listen, power generation, this is like the fundamental thing. People's lives are based around what sort of power generation and the reliability and availability of it If we're talking just about power, there should be a more egalitarian approach. And then, of course, kind of hidden in the back of this are the understandable but often unequal concerns from country to country about access to nuclear weapons, and it becomes just a cluster F.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking about nuclear power, if we're trying to, as a society, as a globe, move away from fossil fuels, then you want other renewables at your disposal. And, nuclear is certainly being explored, and there's questions over the safety of it. But I think that if one country is able to use it as a power source, it stands to reason that maybe another country should be as well. And it's strange, even when you open up the conversation into weapons, why some are allowed to and some just aren't allowed to. I think currently there's maybe 8 countries. It's
I think
the
so.
U.S., France, China, the U.K., Russia, India, Pakistan, and Israel who currently have nuclear weapons. And it's weird for them to turn around and say that other countries can't. But then you have the Iran deal, and that was a wild success until Trump pulled us out of it.
Did you include France in your list? Now I'm going through the list. You did. Okay, yeah. I think there might be one more. In any case, yeah. And as far as the nuclear power thing, I've said before, I don't want nuclear power to be what the human race relies upon long term. But nuclear is way safer now. New nuclear would be way safer now than it was decades ago. And I am open to the idea of using it as a bridge to get off of fossil fuels, although I recognize that if the door were to be opened in that way, it's very easy to say it will merely be a bridge once we get all of that new nuclear on board, which takes years to do. Easier said than done to say we're going to get away from it as soon as we put up enough wind turbines or whatever the case may be. So conceivably, I am very much open to nuclear as a bridge, but easier said than done as far as that's concerned. That's going to do it for today's bonus show. New bonus show tomorrow. And I did a YouTube live stream yesterday. I was planning to do Twitch. I ended up on YouTube yesterday. Today, it will be definitely a Twitch live stream, twitch.tv/David Pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.